Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're diving into Yuval Noah Harari's Nexus today, and we've got a great roadmap for this journey, the 1-Hour Guide by Anil Nathu. You want to understand how information networks have shaped humanity, from ancient myths all the way to the age of AI, and we're here to help you break it all down.
This book really makes you think. It explores how information has always been at the core of human power and progress.
Okay, let's unpack that a little bit. Harari, the guy who wrote *Sapiens*, is back, and this time he's connecting AI and ancient myths. That sounds like a huge leap. How does he even make that connection?
Well, it's fascinating how he argues that human power really comes from our ability to build these large-scale cooperation networks.
Right.
And the key ingredient for this cooperation is information.
Information.
Yeah, think about it. Ancient myths, religious doctrines, legal codes, even those algorithms that drive AI today, they're all forms of information, shaping how we connect and collaborate.
That's interesting. But the 1-Hour Guide also mentions this issue of misinformation, which is a pretty big deal these days. It even uses Facebook as an example. Can you talk about that a bit more?
Absolutely. The 1-Hour Guide by Anil Nathu points out this really interesting paradox about Facebook. It can connect billions of people, which is amazing, but it can also spread misinformation super fast, like wildfire. Harari says often it's the connectivity of the network that's prioritized over the accuracy of the information.
Wow. That's kind of scary. Makes you wonder how we build networks that are powerful and trustworthy. I mean, we can't just unplug from the internet now.
Right, that's the challenge. Harari grapples with this in Nexus, and the 1-Hour Guide summarizes the main ideas really well, especially in the introduction.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are some of those key ideas?
First, he looks at the evolution of networks, from those ancient myths and stories to the rise of artificial intelligence. It's this long journey of how humans have used information to build more and more complex systems of cooperation.
And I bet there are some important lessons to be learned along the way.
Absolutely. The 1-Hour Guide highlights this constant tension between myths and bureaucracies.
Myths and bureaucracy.
Yeah, myths inspire us. They provide meaning and a shared purpose. But bureaucracies are needed for structure and organization to actually get things done.
Makes sense. Every company, every organization needs that balance. You need the big, inspiring vision and someone to handle those day-to-day operations.
Right. And then there's the emergence of AI. Harari sees this as a completely new type of network, not based on human biology or social structures, but algorithms and data processing. He calls it the inorganic network.
Inorganic network. Sounds a little ominous, to be honest. What does he mean by that?
He's basically saying that AI operates on a different level than human networks. Its thinking processes are based on silicon, not carbon, and it can handle complexity at a speed and scale that's way beyond us.
Okay, intrigued and slightly terrified. What happens when these super smart AI systems get things wrong? Because they're not perfect, are they?
Good point. The 1-Hour Guide pulls out this important idea from Nexus. More data doesn't always mean better decisions. AI can be incredibly powerful, but it's also susceptible to bias because it's created by, well, us, humans. The algorithms themselves can reflect our own prejudices and limitations.
So even AI can be flawed, even discriminatory. This is getting pretty deep.
It is, and this is where Harari's book starts exploring the political and societal impacts of AI. But before we jump into that, there's one more key idea from the intro.
Let's hear it.
Harari believes we can learn from history's mistakes. He looks at how information networks have been used for good and bad throughout history. Think of the propaganda in Nazi Germany, the rigid systems of the Cold War. By understanding those failures, we might be able to build better, more ethical networks for the future.
I like that. Learning from the past to build a better future. So he's got this overview of information networks, from ancient myths to the complexities of AI. But how does all this apply to us, like in a practical way?
That's where the 1-Hour Guide is super helpful. It pulls out 8 key lessons from Nexus that leaders and entrepreneurs can use in their work and lives.
8 lessons. That's a lot. Can you give us a sneak peek at a couple of them? What really stood out to you?
One that's really relevant is about the duality of networks. The 1-Hour Guide highlights how networks can spread delusion just as easily as truth. We need to be aware of this and design systems that are safe.
So it's not just about connecting, but about making sure those connections are based on something trustworthy. What other lessons stuck with you?
Another big one, especially today, is the power of storytelling. Harari argues that people are way more likely to be moved by a compelling narrative than by just data. Think about it. Good marketing, effective leadership, Even social movements. They rely on powerful stories to connect with people on an emotional level.
A good story trumps a spreadsheet. I guess that makes sense. It's about tapping into something deeper. Are there any lessons specific to AI?
Yes. Lesson 8 is all about how AI is here to stay. We can't ignore it or wish it away. The one-hour guide emphasizes that leaders need to understand AI, its capabilities, its potential impact, so they can use it responsibly, not just react out of fear.
Solid advice. Sounds like Nexus and the one-hour guide offer a lot to think about. Let's dive into the book itself. Part 1 focuses on human networks. What does Harari explore there?
This is where Harari takes us way back, deep into history, to show how myths and stories, even if they weren't literally true, helped bind societies together. Those shared narratives gave meaning, purpose, a sense of belonging. But he also points out that these societies needed bureaucracies to work. They needed rules, systems, and processes to manage complexity and keep things in order.
It's like that balance we were talking about before, inspiration and organization, the grand vision and the everyday details.
Exactly. Harari also discusses this really important idea: self-correction. Systems that can identify and correct their own errors are more likely to adapt and thrive over time. He contrasts science, which has a built-in self-correction mechanism through peer review, with dogma, which tends to resist change.
So like a company or organization that never admits it's wrong. That's probably in trouble, right?
You could say that. He also contrasts distributed networks like democracies with centralized ones like authoritarian regimes. And he suggests that those distributed networks are more adaptable because they allow for more input and feedback.
That makes sense. They can tap into a wider range of perspectives and information, makes them more resilient to change. So we've got these human networks built on myths and bureaucracies and its ability to self-correct. But then things get a bit more intense with the arrival of AI, right? That's in part 2.
That's where things take a really interesting turn. Get ready. We're about to enter the realm of the inorganic network.
Okay, I'm ready for the ride. We'll be back in a minute to explore part 2 of Nexus with the help of the one-hour guide by Anil Nathu. Okay, we're back and ready to dive into part 2 of Yuval Noah Harari's Nexus. And this part focuses on the inorganic network, a term that definitely piques my curiosity.
Yeah, it's a pretty central concept. It gets to how different AI really is from any other network we've ever seen.
And the one-hour guide by Anil Nathu emphasizes that too, right?
Oh, absolutely. This isn't about, robots taking over the world like in some Hollywood movie. It's much more subtle than that, more pervasive.
Okay, so paint us a picture. What does this inorganic network look like?
Imagine networks that think on silicon, not carbon. They process information so fast, and they can handle levels of complexity that honestly would make our human brains just short circuit. This is the world of algorithms, machine learning. The rules of the game are completely different there.
That's both fascinating and a little bit scary. I can't help but think, what happens when these super smart AIs get things wrong? Because they're not perfect, are they?
That's such a key point that Harari brings up. And the one-hour guide highlights it too. AI can seem so objective, impartial, but it's still created by humans, which means it inherits our biases, our limitations.
So AI can be prejudiced. That's a pretty sobering thought. Does the one-hour guide give any examples of that?
It does. It mentions the case of Amazon's recruiting tool. It was designed to automate hiring, but it ended up discriminating against women because, well, the algorithm was trained on data that reflected existing gender imbalances in the tech industry.
Wow, AI perpetuating sexism. It's a powerful reminder that technology is never neutral. It reflects the people who create it, their values, their biases.
Exactly. And this is where part 2 of Nexus starts to look at the bigger implications of AI. For society, politics. Yeah. It's the foundation for understanding how profoundly AI could change our world.
Okay, so we've got these inorganic networks operating at lightning speed, capable of incredible things, but also prone to our own human flaws. Where does Harari go from there?
That takes us to part 3, computer politics. This is where he tackles how this AI revolution will impact governance and power.
Computer politics. Sounds like things are about to get really interesting. We'll be right back to unpack that final part of Nexus with the help of the one-hour guide by Anil Nathu. We're back for the final part of our deep dive into Yuval Noah Harari's Nexus. We've got the one-hour guide by Anil Nathu to guide us. In the first 2 parts, we talked about how human networks evolved, from ancient myths to the rise of AI, and we explored that idea of the inorganic network, which was pretty mind-blowing. Now we're getting into computer politics. So what exactly does Harari look at in this section?
Well, this is where he brings everything together, all his arguments, and he asks, how's this AI revolution going to impact how we govern ourselves? How will it change power structures?
That's a huge question. Could have some massive consequences. What are some of the things he's worried about?
The 1 Hour Guide lays out 3 main concerns that Harari brings up. The first one is about how AI could change democracy. And not necessarily for the better. Imagine a world where it's algorithms controlling what information we see. Filtering our news feeds, shaping our opinions, leading to echo chambers, more polarization.
It's kind of scary to think our political conversations could be manipulated by algorithms, like we're losing control of the story.
That's the danger, right? Harari's second concern is even scarier. It's about the possibility of AI-powered totalitarianism.
Oh, wow.
Imagine a system of surveillance and control. That's unbelievably efficient and has a huge reach.
So like Big Brother on steroids.
Exactly. And unlike a human dictator, an AI-powered system wouldn't get tired, wouldn't hesitate. It could control huge populations with incredible precision.
Okay, that is officially terrifying. So is there any hope in Harari's view? Or are we all doomed to live under the rule of these super intelligent algorithms?
Hold on, don't despair yet. Harari talks about a third concern. He calls it the Silicon Curtain. Imagine the world splitting up into these rival AI blocks, kind of like the Cold War. But instead of nukes, it's algorithms that are the weapons.
So not just individual countries turning into AI dystopias, but whole regions battling it out for tech dominance. That's a pretty grim picture. Does Harari offer any solutions at all? Or are we just headed straight for this digital abyss?
He does offer some hope. He says the only way to avoid these dystopian scenarios is to cooperate globally. We need to come up with ethical frameworks for developing AI. Make sure these technologies are used to benefit humanity, not to control and dominate.
So it's not all doom and gloom. There's a way forward. But it takes everyone working together to manage these powerful technologies. That's a pretty tall order.
It is, but Nexus makes a strong case for why we need to be talking about this. Globally, we can't ignore the potential consequences if AI just keeps developing unchecked.
Absolutely. Wow, that was quite a journey. From those ancient myths to this idea of a silicon curtain. Yuval Noah Harari's Nexus really gives us a lot to think about. And the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu has been so helpful in understanding these complex ideas.
I agree. It's a great resource for anyone who wants to get the key takeaways from Nexus without reading the whole thing.
I'm left thinking, if information networks are this powerful, and they can really shape our future, who gets to control them? That's a question we all need to consider. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Nexus, and a big thanks to our expert for guiding us through all these fascinating and sometimes challenging ideas.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, if you want to explore those practical lessons from Nexus in more detail, check out the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu. You can find it on their website. They've got other insightful business summaries there too. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing. And remember, the future is in our hands. Thank you for joining us today. Visit the 1 Hour Guide website for more business insights by Anil Nathu.